start.
I wasn't ready for that.
Okay, I'll tell you what feminism is.
And what are we going to talk about today?
Feminism.
What? Welcome to another episode of Sage Takes Time. I'm Amira.
I'm Elissa.
And today we're going to talk about, what are we going to talk about today?
How feminism is a dirty, dirty word. Dirty.
It's made to be a dirty word.
Is it?
Yeah.
It's not dirty in and of itself?
No, it's normal. People are just...
Feminism.
Even then. Feminism is often mislabeled, misidentified, distorted, confused for other things, weaponized against women, all the things, because it's at its core, in its most accurate, pure definition, it's something that can free men and women and all people of the shackles of patriarchy and bullshit and systematic restrictions that we face as humans in our abilities to choose the lives we want for ourselves.
And that's the end of the episode. Thank you for listening. That was a perfect summary. And that's why you need to
follow along from me.
That was, honestly, that was pretty spot on. Like, that's,
Thank you.
You're very accurate. I'm glad you know what it is, because that's what we do.
Alhamdulillah. We figured out what it is. But it took me a long time to get here.
Yeah, I was about to
this,
say.
Understanding. But what does feminism mean to you?
Literally just its dictionary definition.
Yeah.
Which
is, because people don't know.
Which is the movement for equal rights and recognition and opportunity for women under the law as much as men.
Yeah.
It's that for, and not just women and men, but like all people basically should be recognized equally. And that is threatening to a system that thrives off inequality.
Right.
And so we made a very conscious decision and we debated for years as to whether or not we would use the term feminist or feminism openly to describe what we do and our beliefs.
Yeah.
Because it was so haram.
It's not... That was a debate that we had a lot.
With the team too. It was like, if we use it, it's going to alienate an audience. Oh, they're going to think we're anti-men and we're all of this.
I was also against it for a while. Yeah, I was. Not against feminism, just against putting it in our bio, because I felt like it might alienate a certain kind of audience or in the region, especially because we focus on women in and from the Arab world. The word feminism, أو النسوية بالعربي, يعني if it's misconstrued and misunderstood globally, then for sure in the Arab world, it's also seen in a specific light, depending on the country you're in, depending on who's saying it. It gets messy. And so I thought it was easier to say we're just a platform that focuses on women. We're a female-focused storytelling platform.
Yeah.
When we finally changed it after you insisting for several years, that actually became much, much easier for people to understand because it was just clear.
Yes.
And honest.
Yeah.
Thanks.
We're a global media company focusing on women's issues with female-driven storytelling and impact at the heart. Fuck, shut up, dude. It's literally just a feminist media platform.
Yeah.
But it's been bastardized and used and weaponized as a thing that actually is supposed to drive more inequality, which is not possible, to be honest, because they're saying that feminism is anti-men, which it isn't, because men suffer at the heart of the current system, of the system that works under the patriarchy. And feminism wants to just level the fucking playing field.
I think people see feminism as, like you said, it's against men. So the opposite of feminism would be loving men, because when you're a feminist, you hate men. And that's not it. It's feminism is against the patriarchal systems. Mm-hmm. And patriarchal systems and structures are very tied to capitalism. They're tied to white supremacy, to be honest. They're tied to the people of the global south or the global majority being marginalized, being oppressed, being villainized and demonized. And so at least the current form of feminism, as I understand it, that's much more intersectional, that's much more broad in its scope, is meant to be very inclusive, as you said. Mm-hmm. And the way that people weaponize it is to put it as a binary, or with feminism comes this hatred or the fight against men or the role of men or the gender of men in society. And what it actually is, at least to me, is this idea of equality, equal opportunity, equal choice, equal
recognition,
rights.
respect, rights.
Yeah. What you do with that is up to you, right?
Yeah.
How you practice feminism or how you choose to live your life is what it's about.
Mm-hmm.
What you choose is not the issue. So, but also feminism, because a lot of the times it's white feminism that dominates the people's understanding of the word. And so that's why they're against it, which I kind of was like that also not too long ago.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't used to describe myself as a feminist.
Yeah, which is crazy to me.
Yeah.
Because you embody so many of its values.
But I feel like that's a very common thing in our part of the world. I don't want to speak like globally because I only know
I would
like,
say
what
globally. It's very similar in the US, for example. I'm half American. In the US, there's very much still discussion over like, oh, I wouldn't call myself a feminist. Those people that would say, I'm not a socialist. I mean, it's the same type of like, I don't associate with this political ideology. And yet everything in the way that they behave and the beliefs that they have aligns with feminism. But they're too scared to associate themselves with the word because of how it's been villainized.
Yeah.
So that was the same for you.
It was the same for me. And it was, to be honest, I wasn't like educated on feminism much at any point in my life until very recently when I actively was seeking information and knowledge. So it's not like, I mean, I grew up with a very, very strong, powerful, empowered mom who taught me so many things. And she's my role model in so many ways, on so many levels, as a woman, as a mother, as a wife, all the things. But she like did not ever even use that word. She didn't describe herself that way. None of my aunts did. Like it wasn't like a thing that I heard a lot of growing up. And so, and I definitely wasn't educated on it in school. Yani it's not like we studied.
For sure.
Of course, no one's gonna do that. Or even at a university level, I didn't study like gender or women's studies, or so I wasn't exposed to it really until. It's not like I didn't know about it. I just wasn't exposed to it in a deep way until like I started working with Womena and trying to like unpack that more, and then becoming more curious about it and wanting to learn more.
Yeah.
Did you call yourself a feminist growing up? Was it in your periphery, your family? Yeah.
I mean, I grew up in France. So in France, there's a very outspoken culture of political activism, of protest. It's part of your education, not in school, but just in society. You're just exposed to people speaking out for their beliefs, whatever those beliefs are. And there's a very outspoken group that would make headlines called the Femmes in France, who are, you know, very radical, like feminists. And they're very like in your face, hardcore, you know, shirts off, red writing. Like they're very, very aggressively out there for good reason. But it wasn't a thing that I could ignore. But the way it was communicated to me societally was that feminism was a thing that happened back in the day. It was a movement that happened in the 1920s, in the 1970s, like khalas. You know, we live in a post-feminist society now. Everybody is equal. And I've said this before in other contexts, but I think there's this like really funny contradiction where like in the Middle East, the West has villainized this region so much, saying you treat women this way and you guys are unequal and you need to, you know, change the way that you are because you're so backwards with what. And so they put all this like money towards it to make this region more feminist and more equal. But then in the West, they don't acknowledge that they're still unequal. They don't acknowledge that there's still a huge pay gap. There's a huge lack of rights. There's still societal expectations of women giving more to the household or to their family, or that it's still a risk to hire women in the workplace. Like that's still very much part of culture there in the West that they're trying to fight. So I grew up thinking like, oh yeah, like we're done with feminism in the West. And actually the global South is a place where like that change needs to happen. And if I'm going to affect that change, that's where it's going to happen. And then ironically, through Womena, through founding Womena, is when I became more and more aware of the state of inequality and women globally. And in speaking about the issues I was facing in the Middle East, when I would go back to Europe, if I was doing a public speaking thing in like Germany or wherever, there people would come to me and say, oh my God, I experienced the same thing. Or like, you think that it would be so different here, but we actually fall with a very old school Christian mindset where the woman is still the center of the household. And so I still, with my job, get ostracized when I take time off to pick my kids up from school, or I have to leave my work early because supermarkets close at 5 p.m. And if I'm not there to pick up the food, then no one's going to get the food for us.
Yeah. Like, that's exactly like a good point to make, because I think people see feminism as someone is telling me how to live, and this is the only way that I can live, and I have to be like, I perform this way and practice life this way and whatever. Whereas feminism is like a mindset. It's a perspective, it's a lens to have on the world that centers women and centers equality and certain values, so that all the ways in which we live and carry and move around life and do our like daily tasks, like going to the supermarket, don't ignore, because they've traditionally ignored women and their responsibilities and their roles in society and whatever, and also have pigeonholed men in a very specific frame that they have to fulfill forever. So it's a mindset and it's a lens that you have on everything. Like, you can be feminist minded in the way you build a business. You can be feminist minded in the way that you speak to people and your expectations from your partner, and having that openness and not ignoring the fact that the way systems are built are very racist, they're very misogynist, they're very restrictive. And yeah, like an example, like going to the supermarket but 5 p.m. and like that's a more feminist minded society would honor women and their duties and their lives and their womanhood more. And that's actually, for me at least, what feminism is meant to do.
I think you mentioned on a really good point, like the intersectionality of feminism, that almost has been saving the word.
Yeah.
Because conventionally, what people I recognize had an issue with was this white-centered feminism, where in European, US fight for women's rights, there was segregation where some women believed that it was easier to just get rights for white women rather than rights for all women. And then that fractioned the movement, right? Because all of a sudden it's like, oh, okay, but if we really want change, we're not going to be able to do it within this framework of colonial capitalism. So we have to do it in a way that they can digest, which is going to be like, okay, well, it's just white women for now then.
Yeah.
And that goes completely against the actual core values of what feminism originally was created for. And now that people have added this word of like intersectionality, that makes it more okay. We are intersectional feminists. I have it in my like Instagram bio, we're like, I'm an intersectional feminist because I want to highlight two people that I am a feminist that looks at the statement on a broad global spectrum that includes all and any ethnicity, religion, gender, whatever. Everything falls under this space and everything deserves that kind of equality.
Yeah.
But it gets screwed because it uses fem in the word.
Yeah.
And that's what scares people. Like if it was called
Equalism,
yeah, unitedism, like humanism, that, some people will come and, I mean, humanism is already a word with its own definition, but that might be less scary and more easily adopted than a word that actually uses the derivative of female in it at the beginning. So is the word even important?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Is it important? It's not vital to like take on that label and adopt it and label yourself this way. It's not like, I think so many people, like my mom as an example, she embodies feminist values and she lives her life that way, but she doesn't label herself that way. And even if I had like a long conversation with her and tried to convince her, and she wouldn't feel it was necessary to go around saying I'm a feminist. And I don't think that everyone has to do that. I think it's important to understand the core of it and to try to see life that way and to try and to live in a way that, like we said, honors everyone and their expectations and their duties in life and their whatever. But it's not super necessary to label yourself that way. As opposed to us as like an institution, I think it is important to say where we stand and our approach. I think it's a big indicator of our approach to content and to storytelling on that level. I don't know. I don't know if the label for individuals is that important if they're living life that way already. Like,
well, I mean, I don't think it's important for everyone to go around yelling like I'm a feminist, but I think when it is important to acknowledge that you align with those values, if you do, and if someone asks you, you know, what I hate is really when you ask someone or someone that feels the need to say like, but I'm not a feminist.
yeah.
Like
Right.
they feel the need to distance themselves from the word in a conversation, or they go, "Yee, انت كتير feminist, انت شو هيدا يعني?" Like I'm so, as if me just wanting everyone to be equal and happy and treated with respect is like such a like gross thing, you know, in the world. Like I don't think it matters until it does. And when it comes to Womena, why I felt it was important. One, it was just faster and easier to put the fact that we're a purpose-driven community at the forefront of what we do. Like, if you read about Womena, we're a feminist media company. People can think that's a gross word, but those are the values that drive what we do, why we do, and what is important to our community. So it's important to have it in there and to not be afraid. And if anything, it starts a dialogue that people can maybe get more and more comfortable with the word over time, and to say, you know, I'm a total feminist. My mom also, I didn't grow up with my mom who's American saying I'm a feminist, oh my God, of course. But she totally is, and she is definitely like, now she'll proudly wear that badge when asked.
I think one issue for me that made me a little fearful of the label, especially because we are based in different cities around the Arab world. Like, there are organizations that are like rights organizations and rights groups that work to advocate for gender equality and on feminist issues, and in a much more like on the ground way that's like
fighting for laws and things
like
to change.
Legal change, and working with different stakeholders, and kind of like raising awareness about feminism and educating people on it, and then like putting themselves at great risk just because of the nature of a lot of political and social workings of certain countries around the region. A lot of that work is risky when you get to like the deep grassroots level of it. So I felt like, well, we can't call ourselves that. We're not like, not that our work is not important, but for me, it's like, oh, this is important work, plus risk, plus all of these things, plus it's very burdensome, plus it's like underfunded, plus all of these things. So if that person and that organization is calling themselves like a feminist or gender rights group, then we can't do that, because, you know what I mean? It was like a...
Well, did you think that like you have to earn the right to use that word for your actions?
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah,
I never thought about
like
that
because we're not like there fighting for laws to be changed, or like on the ground setups of spaces to protect whatever. Like, do we not deserve to share in those values and to then use that term for ourselves?
That's never how I saw it, but more so like I felt like those groups or women or whatever would look at us and be like, and you're just creating content. And I know that that's important and why it's important. I didn't want to be like unintentionally appropriating a label when we're not working for it in a way that I see other people work for it. But now I see that because of the definition, like how we defined it earlier in the episode, now I realize that there's so much work that needs to be done in this space. And there's room for everyone to play a role in whatever capacity they can, in whatever passion drives them. And that this is feminism and this is also feminism, and then someone else cannot label themselves this way, but they hold the values, and there has to be room for all of us. And sometimes we can work together or we can work separately, but there's, from the massive amount of work that needs to be done still, and this is global also, it's not even just in the region or just in Egypt or whatever, but there's definitely like so much room for different institutions to exist and different people to do different kinds of work. Yeah. I just didn't realize that before, or I didn't like see it as valuable, maybe. Oh.
But I mean, so we're fighting, like, we're not fighting. I'm not fighting. I'm all peace.
Are we fighting?
Love.
No, we're good.
We never fight about serious stuff. We only fight about stupid stuff. No, but I mean, like, okay, societally, like, this word also applies differently when you're considering it under the eyes of the law or under the eyes of society and culture. Often I'll have conversations with people where it goes to, of course, I believe women should be protected under the law to the same degree as men. They can like accept that base definition, let's say, of conventional feminism. But then when you bring it towards more culturally, like women shouldn't be expected to fulfill all of the roles that they have been, people get involved and get all like up in their feelings about it, you know, like, oh, okay, well, yeah, they should have the same protection, but it's like, if a woman is working and making money, then what am I contributing to the relationship as a man?
Mm-hmm.
Those are like real conversations I have. And, you know,
Yeah.
I have to tell them, like, if you think your only contribution to a relationship is the money you bring home, honey, I'm so sorry. I feel so bad for you that you think that's all you're worth.
All of that stems from the same system, the
Yeah.
same structure, like misogyny or patriarchy or
Yeah.
yani,
But they
thinking-
are different arguments.
right. But I think this potential to convince people
Yeah.
and to get them on that side, if you are able to connect the dots
Mm-hmm.
between the two sides, so that the cultural role of women, for example, or socially what they can do or can't do and whatever, is not so disconnected from the laws that give them those rights or grant them those or protect those rights or protect them from anything that goes against that. Do you know what I mean?
Not really.
Okay, for example,
I want to say yes, totally. I'm getting it. I'm on the same level, but I'm not totally getting it. So, okay, explain more.
So if you are saying that you believe that women should have the same opportunity under the law
Mm-hmm.
as men, for
Mhm.
example, one contentious issue in the region, we're going to talk about like the Arab world for a second,
Yeah.
even though each country has different challenges when it comes to women's issues and laws and stuff. But for a second, let's go a little bit broad. The right to divorce for women was not something that was granted until like recent history. I don't want to like give a year that's incorrect, but
Mhm.
there was no legal pathway for women to seek a divorce
Mhm.
from a marriage that they were not fulfilled in, that they were being abused in, that whatever the reason is,
Mhm.
there was not that right
Mhm.
for them. And the reasons or the justifications given at the time for not giving women the right to get a divorce legally
Mhm.
were a lot of the ways that other issues are still now being manipulated. So there was a bit of religion in there was a bit of social constrictions, a bit of traditional mindsets, all of that mixed together to say that this was not possible.
Mhm.
When in fact, if feminists and people that care about women's rights advocated for it for years, to the point that it made it into like mainstream media in Egypt, and there was this film about it and it got a conversation started or whatever, and then we're like, okay, I guess we can look into it, you know. Now if you're gonna like keep talking about it, and it took so long for people to like look into the sharia side of it, like the
Mhm.
religious legal framework that a lot of Arab countries work within, at least as far as I know in Egypt, and really look into it and restudy it and reinterpret some things that were misinterpreted before, and then to start a social discourse over it, to normalize it and all of that stuff. Suddenly now you don't have to be forced to stay in a marriage
Mhm.
that is unfulfilling, that it's abusive, that's whatever, if you're a woman.
Mhm.
On the other side, historically forever, men could divorce women with one word. And you can say, "Inti tale," I divorce you, and that's it. So not you, you're okay.
But you said it.
I did.
How do you unsay it?
You have to have the intention. It's all
How
kind
do you
of like,
unsay it?
you don't. You have to.
Oh my God, unsay it.
You're
Okay.
back. You're back.
Okay.
No, but it's like that's an example. If
I
you
felt it.
socially believe on a normal like society level that women and men, yeah, of course they're equal. You know, like we're
Mhm.
all, God made us all of that. But then you come to things that have a more like legal side, that especially that have to do with the family. That's where a lot of globally even
Mhm.
women's rights issues get trampled.
Mhm.
Anything have to do with the kids, the family, marriage, custody, like that's really where, yeah, bodily autonomy, that's where
Mhm.
you can really control women and their futures. So that's an example of how, if you can get someone to see that those two are linked, then it becomes a bit clearer. Then the two
Mhm.
sides are not so disconnected legally,
Yeah.
masalan, and socially.
Yeah. It also makes me think of like financial independence being so
Yeah.
pivotal to women's equality and freedom societally, but is very often framed under the gender pay gap,
Yeah.
right? And the idea that like just out of principle, we should all be paid equally. But
Right.
there's still people that will argue like, oh, well, I'm not like, I don't discriminate, like whatever, the job is what the job is and people get paid what they get paid. But realistically, there is still this like inherent expectation that men are going to provide more for family. Therefore, women don't need to get paid more. And there's an understanding of like an interpretation that it's more about like the principle of equality rather than if women are not financially independent or are not paid for work that they provide, then they are completely dependent on the circumstances and trapped within those circumstances if those circumstances get hard. So even if, let's say, women get a right to divorce, that's equal under the law. But culturally, it's still not okay for women to work, or it's women are subject to discrimination for having to prioritize family and work. Then they're just as trapped in a marriage as they would have been without the right to get divorced, because they're not able to actually take the stand that they need to leave. Because what am I going to do? I have to pay for my kids' food, or I have for myself to pay for somewhere to sleep, and I have to eat food, and I have to drink water. And if I've never worked or I've never been able to get paid for something, and I don't have a little nest egg, for myself to rely on myself, then I cannot make decisions for myself. So there's also that line that you have to kind of draw between, okay, legal protection for equal pay, but cultural expectation that workload is not equal and women are not going to be generating money in the same way.
Yeah. This is one thing, I think, when we were talking about our mothers maybe not calling themselves feminists, like this is one thing that from a very, very, very young age, even before I understood exactly what I was being like taught, what was being passed on to me from my mother, there was, and my father, to be fair, like they both really, like in their different ways, they both really like drove this in me from a young age. And no, women who are not financially independent, like you said, are never really able to fully make the choices that they want in life, and will be like entrapped somehow in a situation or a dynamic that might be unsafe or unwanted or whatever. And so I don't think they realized that this was a feminist-minded approach to life and to freedom and to independence. But they knew, because of things they had seen, experienced, people that they had seen around them, dynamics that they had seen that were very like dangerous or abusive. And it was all, a lot of it could be tied back to the fact that women in these situations are ended up there and are forced to stay there because historically they were not allowed to make decisions for their life and choose things like getting an education or continuing their education or working or continuing to work after having kids or not having kids, like all of these choices that were kind of forced onto them. And I knew from an early age, and they also made me understand that like financial independence is very, very, very tied to independence in general. I think that's true for all humans, not just women.
Well, in the world we live in, unless you happen to be lucky enough to be in some sort of socialist country that has these safety nets that are widely publicized and easily accessible, everybody suffers from this.
Yeah.
Realistically. And the tables are turned if you're in a partnership that's heterosexual where the guy is not working and the woman is working and she's not providing some sort of like pocket cash, or whoever the partner is, there is this unequal kind of distribution of freedom based around money because of the society that we live in.
I think sometimes people see maybe feminism as taking away things from other groups. Like I'm taking away something.
Like there's a finite amount of freedom.
Of freedom or of like power or of whatever. And so if I, as a woman, have aspirations and want power and want to be able to be independent and make my own choices and stuff like that, that means I'm taking something away from the men in my life, or if I have a partner or my father, or, it's not that. It's an addition to, it's not like a taking something away from somebody else. And I think that's where you always have this counterattack of like, what about men?
Yeah.
It's the same with, on a simpler level, with Womena. A lot of people ask us, like, why do you only do storytelling around women? Why do you only talk to women? It's like, what? We can do whatever we want, first of all. Second of all, why not? It's not taking away anything. First of all, there's a need for it. And we can go, like, we kind of already mentioned all of that, the women's voices and the power of that and the importance of it and whatever. But it's not like, it's not taking away something from some other space. It's adding to the conversation.
It's expanding the space. I remember somebody getting so upset about that Disney movie, Raya and the Dragon, or whatever, Raya and the Last Dragon. they were like, okay, khalas, Disney's done enough movies with female protagonists at this point. Like, this feminist thing is going too far. I have kids, I have boys, they need more role models that are boys. Like, you've done enough. Now Disney's pushing it too much. But realistically, statistically, there's still such a discrepancy in terms of how many male role models there are for kids to look up to in certain contexts, and how many female role models there are, and how many alternative types of role models there are. Like, there's so much space for it. It reminds me of, Farida the author, that like Instagram writer. She does these really deep. Like, she has these perspectives on feminism, on society, but speaks to a lot to feminists. And I think she wrote one time something that really, really hit home to me and kind of like shifted my perspective, which is essentially that men who are scared of the world feminism proposes is because subconsciously they know that women are treated badly. They know that this discrepancy and this inequality is there. And they fear that if there's more equality, then they will have to experience that mistreatment. Right? So it's actually like, it's not something where they're scared to lose power, but they're actually more scared of being treated the way they know women are treated. And
like, if the balance tips too far to one side, then they're gonna get screwed, basically.
But it's not that they're unaware that women are treated unequally. It's just that it's not their problem. And they don't want it to become their problem, because they don't understand that, like, a rising tide raises all ships, like that this type of equality and freedom actually was going to be better for everyone.
I want to like break down the different ways that women are like penalized for their choices by the people around them, by society, unintentionally, intentionally, whatever. So I think, and this might be a good way to, like, if someone doesn't really get the point of feminism, that maybe this is like something that you can say to show them how things are really inherently like unfair.
This segment is called Amira's knowledge bomb, about to be dropped.
No, it's not a knowledge bomb.
Insert graphic here.
I think if you walk people through the progression of like women's lives and the different paths they can take throughout their lives, and how society either restricts them from those opportunities or penalizes them for it. So in different communities, the opportunity for education for girls is not as equal as the boys and the men in society. So they start off already on an unequal footing. And then you get to a point where you want to like continue your education, university, also the same. If you decide to work or not work, you're kind of judged for that either way at different points in your life and from different communities. If you choose not to work, people will judge you for that, and they'll be like, oh yeah, you're so backwards or whatever. If you choose to work, you also get judged from that, from different people with different perspectives. If you want to get married or not get married, if you want to be a mother or not be a mother, if you want to delay motherhood, you get judged for that. If even after you choose to be a mother and like kind of do what society traditionally expects of women, you'll find that in your work, you will not go back to the same place, or your opportunities for promotion and for like your ambitions are a bit diluted now that you are a mother, and maybe you don't have the same opportunities as you did before. So it's really this idea of like at every stage of your life and at every like what should be like a milestone in your life as a woman, you have difficult choices to make, and someone out there is going to judge you either way. So I think that's the whole framework and system that we're working to like dismantle. And it's not so we could all make the same kind of choices. It's so we can all have the freedom to make whatever choices we want along the journey and in those different ways, and to like shape our lives the way we want.
On a personal note also, the lesson learned from what you just described to me is basically, if you're gonna get judged for going left, and you're gonna get judged for going right, and you're gonna get judged for going backwards, and you're gonna get judged for going forwards, then just do whatever the hell you want, because you're gonna get judged anyway. So just
live your life.
Live your damn life. And that was this week's episode of Sage Takes Time. We hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please like and comment and share and subscribe and support
Tell your
us.
friends.
Tell your friends. Become a member on YouTube. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Really helps us out. Follow us on Instagram.
@Womena.
Yeah.